Picture a map of the ancient world. Over the millennia, borders are drawn, they're erased, and they're redrawn all over again. Superpowers emerge with this terrifying force. They claim absolute dominion, and then, eventually, they just vanish into the dust. But amidst all of that historical turnover, there's this fascinating anomaly, a geographic and cultural fortress that has been besieged, battered, and burned by almost every major empire in human history. And yet, somehow, it remains. Welcome. Today, in this explainer, we are unpacking a gripping geopolitical thriller spanning over 2 millennia to figure out exactly how one national identity has survived the unthinkable.
Empires rise and empires fall, but there is one nation on Earth that absolutely refused to stay conquered. Over 2,300 years ago, Alexander the Great marched right into Persia, burning its majestic capital to ashes. He thought he had ended them forever. Well, he was wrong. From Alexander to the brutal Mongol hordes, from Islamic conquests to modern-day stealth jets, intense Western sanctions, and global isolation, so many have tried to crush this nation. But for over 2 millennia, no conqueror, no superpower, and no empire has ever been able to keep the Iranian people down for long. Today, we're uncovering the unbreakable DNA of Iran, a nation that has survived literally every single superpower in human history.
Okay, let's dive into this. The sources we're analyzing today point to one core thesis. There is a cyclical, historical indestructibility to the Iranian identity. Now, the defining characteristic here isn't that they're never defeated, because actually, they've suffered some catastrophic military defeats. No, the defining trait is that no foreign power has been able to subjugate them for a long period. They might lose the battle or, hey, even lose the kingdom for a century, but their cultural DNA acts almost like a virus to the conqueror. It's fascinating. Let's track exactly how they pull this off. To truly grasp the magnitude of this, we need to look at this massive 2,300-year roadmap. It's a timeline of existential threats. Look at this. 330 BC, Alexander the Great. Then, in 224 AD, a massive resurgence with the Sasanian Empire. By 651 AD, you have the Arab conquests. Fast forward to 1219 AD, the sheer terror of the Mongol invasions. And finally, the immense geopolitical pressures of our modern era. Think about it. The Romans didn't survive their collapse. The ancient Egyptians were fundamentally transformed. But the data shows this nation taking the absolute worst history has to throw at it, absorbing the blow, and just keeping going.
Section 1. Alexander's fiery invasion.
Let's rewind the clock all the way back to the year 330 BC. That number represents absolute unimaginable devastation. Alexander's armies sweep through the Persian Empire, and it culminates in the sacking of Persepolis. This was the awe-inspiring capital of the ancient Persian world. The city gets looted, and its magnificent palaces are literally burned to ashes. For all intents and purposes, Alexander thought he had wiped Persian civilization off the map forever. Their capital was physically destroyed, their armies were routed, and their king was dead. By all traditional metrics of history, this should have been the end of the story.
But here is the incredible twist. Out of total military defeat and physical collapse emerged this massive cultural victory. Now, what's really interesting about this is that instead of dying out under Greek rule, the Persian culture persisted. It basically wrapped itself around the conquerors. Alexander himself actually started adopting Persian dress, their court rituals. He even married a Persian noblewoman. So the Greeks conquered the land, sure, but the Persian culture practically conquered the Greeks. They preserved their identity by making the invaders entirely dependent on their administrative and cultural sophistication.
Section 2. Rebirth from the ashes.
You know, surviving total destruction once, you could chalk that up to a historical fluke. But our sources identify a distinct, recurring blueprint for their unbreakable DNA. It goes like this. Step 1. Suffer a devastating, near-apocalyptic invasion. Step 2. Rather than resist to the point of total annihilation, culturally absorb and bureaucratically entangle the conqueror. You basically teach them how to rule using your own systems. Step 3. Rebuild that unique national identity from the inside out. They manage to turn short-term military defeat into long-term cultural resurgence. The invader eventually leaves, fades away, or just completely assimilates. And what's left standing is, once again, Iran.
Let's move forward and see how this builds through subsequent centuries. Following the Hellenistic period, the Sasanian Empire brings this spectacular reclamation of native power, but then in the 7th century, that empire completely collapses under the weight of the massive Arab conquests. A new religion and a new language sweep the entire region, yet again the cycle repeats itself. They adopt Islam, absolutely, but they do not become Arabs. They maintain their distinct Persian language and literature.
They actually ended up providing a huge chunk of the scholars and administrators for the Islamic Golden Age. They preserved that core identity deep within a completely new empire.
Section 3. Surviving the Mongol hordes.
Now, arguably, the greatest test of this survival cycle was still to come. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer, unimaginable grit of this population against their biggest existential threat yet, the Mongol invasions of the 13th century. They weren't just about conquering land, they were about total annihilation. Entire cities wiped off the map. Millions perished. It was apocalyptic. Yet, against all odds, their unique identity was painstakingly reconstructed. Once again, the Mongol rulers, the Al-Khanate, eventually adopted Islam. They started speaking Persian, and they became massive patrons of Persian art. The conquerors were completely assimilated by the deeply rooted culture of the conquerors.
Section 4. Modern Geopolitics and Defiance. So, what does this all mean for us today? How does this ancient resilience translate to our incredibly tense modern world? Well, when we objectively compare the ancient era to the present day, a really clear parallel emerges. In the past, the threats were Alexander and the Mongols seeking imperial conquest through brute physical destruction. Today, the threats take the form of modern wars, intense Western sanctions, and severe global economic isolation. Now, we are not here to endorse any political viewpoints, but the historical data presents a continuous loop. The tools have changed. We've gone from catapults to economic embargoes and stealth technology, but that intense external pressure, it remains exactly the same.
So, the crucial point is how this historical framework actually explains current events. When we look at how Iran navigates intense global pressure today, how it endures modern conflicts, and survives incredibly heavy Western sanctions, we are literally watching a 2,300-year-old survival mechanism play out in real time. They are maintaining national cohesion without breaking. Just as their ancestors refused to be permanently subjugated by the Greeks or the Mongols, the modern Iranian state utilizes a deeply ingrained cultural blueprint to absorb external shocks, isolate the damage, and persist against the immense weight of the international community.
We've tracked a truly epic journey today, all the way from the burning ruins of Persepolis through the devastating charges of the Mongol hordes, right up to the complex, high-stakes geopolitical standoffs of the 21st century. And through it all, that cycle of absorption, adaptation, and resurgence has never failed them. They have survived every single superpower in human history. So as we look at the headlines tomorrow and watch the ongoing tensions on the global stage, we have to ask ourselves this final question. What exactly is the innermost secret to this 2,300-year unbreakable DNA? And what happens when an unstoppable modern force meets a historically immovable object?